routine traffic stop turns into a nightmare when a woman is accused of a crime she didn't commit. But as she fights for her freedom, she stumbles upon something far worse. Something the police never expected her to uncover. What happens when the truth is bigger than the lie? Let us know in the comments section below. Jasmine Carter had been in tight spots before, but nothing like this. She gripped the steering wheel as the red and blue lights flashed in her rearview mirror, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She wasn't speeding, she wasn't on her phone, she wasn't even playing music too loud. So, why were they stopping her? She pulled over carefully, her hands at 10 and 2, breathing in through her nose and out through her mouth. Stay calm, stay polite, stay alive. She had gone over this 100 times before. Every black person had. A heavy hand tapped on the window. Jasmine turned and saw the officer staring at her through dark aviator sunglasses. "License and registration," he said flatly. She reached into the glove compartment, moving deliberately, her fingers brushing against the crisp paper of her registration. Her license was in her wallet, inside her purse. She turned back toward the officer, lifting both hands so he could see them clearly. "My wallet is in my bag," she said carefully. "I'm going to reach for it now." The officer didn't respond. He just stood there, his fingers flexing over the gun at his waist. Jasmine swallowed hard and moved slowly, her pulse skyrocketing as she unzipped her purse and pulled out her wallet. She handed over her documents, forcing herself to smile. "Is there a problem, officer?" He didn't answer. Instead, he turned to his partner, a shorter, stockier cop standing just behind him. They exchanged a look. The first officer, the one with the sunglasses, leaned down, his face inches from hers. "Step out of the vehicle." Jasmine's stomach dropped. "Excuse me?" He said, "Step out of the vehicle. Now." She hesitated. "What's this about?" The cop's lips curled into a smirk. "We'll discuss it once you're out of the car." Jasmine exhaled sharply. This wasn't normal. She had done nothing wrong. Still, she couldn't afford to make a scene. She unbuckled her seatbelt and pushed the door open. As soon as she was standing, the officer turned her around and slammed her against the car. "Hangi," she gasped. "Hands behind your back," he ordered. Her instincts screamed at her to resist, to demand an explanation, but she forced herself to comply. Cold metal snapped around her wrists. "You're under arrest," the officer said. Jasmine's mind went blank. "For what?" The second officer stepped closer, his voice dripping with condescension. "For grand theft auto." Jasmine blinked. "What? This is my car." The taller officer smirked again. "Not according to our records." She twisted to look at them, her heart hammering against her ribs. "This is a mistake. I have the registration. My name is on it." "Eh?" The shorter cop stepped forward, eyes gleaming. "Then why does this car match the description of a stolen vehicle from 3 nights ago?" Jasmine's breath hitched. "That's impossible." The taller officer pulled out his radio. "Dispatch, we got her." "Got me?" Jasmine's body went cold. This wasn't a mistake. This was a setup. The holding cell smelled like sweat and disinfectant, a claustrophobic box filled with metal benches and regret. Jasmine sat in the corner, her arms wrapped around herself, her mind racing. None of this made sense. How could her car be reported stolen? She had never even been in trouble before. She was a law-abiding, tax-paying citizen. She had a career, a home, a child to take care of. And now she was sitting in a police station, like a common criminal. Go what they get you for. Jasmine looked up. Across from her, a young woman with smudged eyeliner and a torn hoodie was staring at her, chewing gum like she had all the time in the world. "Something I didn't do," Jasmine said. The girl snorted. "Ain't that what we all say?" Jasmine looked away, biting the inside of her cheek. The door swung open, and a familiar voice rang out. Her best friend, Malik, stood just beyond the bars, his expression a mix of concern and barely contained anger. A public defender by day and an activist by night, Malik had been her best friend since college, the only person who had always been in her corner. The officer escorting him gave Jasmine a look of amusement before unlocking the cell. "You're free to go." Jasmine stood slowly. "Wait. That's it?" The officer shrugged. "Someone posted your bail." Jasmine turned to Malik. "You paid to get me out?" "Wasn't me," he said grimly. "Somebody beat me to it." Jasmine's stomach twisted. "Who?" Malik shook his head. "No clue. But they want to meet with you." She frowned. "Meet with me? Who?" Malik exhaled sharply, then leaned in. "Jas, something about this ain't right. I looked into your case already, the stolen car report. It was filed by 2 officers who have been flagged multiple times for misconduct, and guess what?" Jasmine's heart pounded. "What?" "They have a history of pinning crimes on innocent people." Jasmine's breath caught. She had been targeted. And whoever bailed her out, they knew something she didn't. Her blood ran cold. Who had pulled her out of that cell? And what did they want from her? Jasmine Carter sat across from Malik in his car, gripping the paper cup of coffee he had handed her. The warmth barely reached her fingers. Her mind was still spinning from the night before. "Somebody wanted me out," she muttered, staring blankly through the windshield. "But why?" Malik shifted in his seat. "That's what we're going to find out." He pulled his laptop onto his lap, fingers flying across the keyboard. He was a genius at this. Give Malik an hour and he could tell you what kind of coffee a cop drank before a raid. Jasmine leaned closer. "You said the cops who arrested me have a history?" Malik nodded. Brent O'Donnell and Jason Mills. 5 complaints of excessive force, 2 internal investigations for planting evidence, but guess what? Jasmine's stomach dropped. "They're still on the force." Malik let out a humorless laugh. "You know how it works. Slap on the wrist, desk duty for a few weeks, then back on the street." Jasmine shook her head. "But why me? Why this case?" Malik tapped a few more keys before spinning the screen toward her. "That's what I was wondering too. So I looked up the stolen car report. Turns out the owner of the stolen vehicle is a company, not a person." Jasmine frowned. "A company?" "Yeah. Some shell corporation, no real information on it." He narrowed his eyes. "And here's the kicker. The complaint was filed the morning after your arrest." Jasmine's breath hitched. "That doesn't even make sense." "Exactly. Which means they didn't even have a stolen vehicle report when they stopped you. They made it up. They were setting you up for something." Jasmine's hands trembled around her cup. "I need to talk to whoever bailed me out." Malik exhaled. "Already ahead of you. I did some digging." He reached into his bag and pulled out a slip of paper. "The person who paid your bail is meeting us in an hour. Some lawyer named Patricia Holloway." Jasmine blinked. "Patricia Holloway? That name sounds familiar." Malik smirked. "It should. She's a federal investigator." Jasmine and Malik walked into a quiet cafe, scanning the tables. In the corner sat a tall, poised black woman in her early 50s, wearing a crisp navy blue blazer. Her eyes met Jasmine's, and she gave a small nod. Patricia Holloway. Jasmine and Malik sat across from her, tension thick in the air. "You're probably wondering why I bailed you out," Patricia said, her voice smooth but firm. "That would be nice to know," Jasmine replied, crossing her arms. Patricia laced her fingers together. "I've been investigating O'Donnell and Mills for over a year. I have reason to believe they're involved in a much bigger operation. What happened to you last night wasn't random. It was calculated." Jasmine's pulse quickened. "Calculated for what?" Patricia leaned in. "These 2 officers have been running a scheme. They pin crimes on innocent people. specifically black residents, then leverage their arrests for something bigger. Malik frowned. What do you mean, leverage? Patricia's gaze darkened. Think about it. They frame people for crimes they didn't commit. Then suddenly evidence goes missing or charges get dropped. In exchange, those same victims end up paying off the police in one way or another, whether it's money, property, or silence. Jasmine inhaled sharply. Are you saying they're running an extortion ring? Patricia nodded. And I think you just got caught in it. Jasmine leaned back, her mind reeling. But why would they come after me? Patricia studied her carefully. You work in legal analysis, right? Jasmine hesitated, then nodded. I analyze contracts, financial records, legal loopholes. Why? Patricia pulled a folder from her bag and slid it across the table. Jasmine opened it and felt the breath leave her lungs. Inside were pages of financial records, wire transfers, fake accounts, falsified police reports. And at the bottom of one of the pages, her employer's name. Jasmine's head shot up. This is from my firm. Patricia nodded. O'Donnell and Mills have been covering up fraudulent financial transactions for years. Money laundering, embezzlement, real estate scams. And your firm has been unwittingly, or maybe even deliberately, helping them cover their tracks. Jasmine's stomach twisted. That's why they set me up. They needed me silenced. Patricia's voice was firm. They must have realized you were close to finding something, so they decided to make you disappear into the system before you could connect the dots. Jasmine clenched her fists. So what do we do now? Patricia leaned in. We build a case. I already have evidence, but I need someone on the inside. Someone they already see as a threat. Jasmine's pulse pounded. You want me to go back to work and dig deeper? It's risky, Patricia admitted, but if we get the right files, we can bring them down. Jasmine exhaled slowly. She had spent her whole life playing by the rules. She worked hard, kept her head down, avoided trouble. And look where it got her. Her gaze hardened. I'm in. Jasmine sat at her desk the next day, her fingers moving steadily over her keyboard. She was searching, digging. She pulled up files she had never looked at before. Financial transfers that didn't add up, police reports that contradicted official records, real estate deals with names she now recognized, names connected to O'Donnell and Mills. She hit print on a few key documents, slipping them into a folder. Her heart pounded as she prepared to leave the office. But as she grabbed her bag, a shadow fell over her desk. She looked up. Brent O'Donnell. His smirk was slow, deliberate. Ms. Carter. Didn't expect to see you back at work so soon. Jasmine swallowed. I have bills to pay. O'Donnell chuckled. Yeah, I get that. Listen, about the other night. He pulled out a folded piece of paper and slid it toward her. No hard feelings, right? Jasmine picked up the paper, unfolding it. Inside was a waiver, a document stating she would not file charges or pursue legal action against the police department. She forced a smile. This is thorough. O'Donnell leaned on her desk, lowering his voice. Just sign it, and we'll forget this ever happened. Jasmine held his gaze. And if I don't? His smirk faded. Then I can't guarantee you'll like what happens next. Jasmine's blood ran cold, but she refused to flinch. I'll think about it. O'Donnell nodded, giving her one last smirk before walking away. Jasmine exhaled shakily. She wasn't just in danger. She was officially a target. And now, there was no turning back. Jasmine Carter sat in her car, gripping the unsigned waiver that Officer O'Donnell had handed her. Her fingers curled into the paper, crumpling it slightly as she stared at the black ink spelling out her supposed freedom. All she had to do was sign, and everything would go away. But that was the problem. It wouldn't go away. She was supposed to be just another victim, another black woman railroaded by the system, scared into silence. But they had miscalculated. They had underestimated her. Her phone buzzed. "Malik, you good?" His voice was tight, like he already knew the answer. "They want me to sign something, waive my rights." Malik cursed under his breath. "That means they're scared. They know you've got something on them." Jasmine inhaled sharply, gripping the steering wheel. "Then it's time to hit back." The next morning, Jasmine walked into her office with purpose, her heels clicking against the polished floor. She knew O'Donnell and Mills were watching her. She could feel their presence, lingering like a storm cloud waiting to burst. She sat at her desk and booted up her computer. The files she had printed the day before were locked in her bag, but she needed more. She needed proof that couldn't be dismissed or ignored. Her fingers flew over the keyboard. Shell companies, bank accounts in offshore locations, property seizures with missing documentation. It was all there, hidden beneath layers of bureaucracy. Jasmine grabbed her phone and snapped pictures of the files on the screen. Then she plugged a flash drive into her computer and copied the most damning documents. Her heart pounded as she ejected the drive and slipped it into her pocket. She stood and reached for her bag. "Going somewhere?" She froze. O'Donnell was leaning against the cubicle wall, his arms crossed. Mills stood beside him, his hand resting near his holster. Jasmine forced a calm breath. "Lunch break." O'Donnell smirked. "Not yet, you're not." Mills moved closer, his voice low. "Boss wants to see you." Jasmine's skin prickled. "Boss?" She clenched her jaw. "Who exactly is your boss?" O'Donnell's smirk widened. "You're about to find out." Jasmine was led into a dimly lit office on the second floor of a nondescript government building. Seated behind a massive desk was a man in his 60s, gray-haired, sharp-eyed, and exuding authority. She recognized him immediately. Chief Randall Walker, the head of the department, the man who had issued statements about transparency and accountability, the one who always assured the public that justice was being served. Her stomach twisted. He was in on it. Walker gestured to the chair in front of him. "Sit." Jasmine remained standing. "I'll pass." O'Donnell shut the door behind her, blocking the exit. Mills leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Walker sighed. "Ms. Carter, let's not waste each other's time. You've been poking around in things that don't concern you." Jasmine scoffed. "I was framed for a crime I didn't commit. I think that concerns me." Walker leaned forward. "I don't think you understand how deep this goes. People in powerful places have a vested interest in making sure this all stays buried." Jasmine's heart pounded, but she refused to let them see her fear. "And I'm supposed to just let that happen?" Walker's gaze darkened. "You're a smart woman, Ms. Carter. Smarter than most. That's why I'm giving you a choice. Walk away now, sign that waiver, and you get to keep your job, your life, your freedom." Jasmine let out a bitter laugh. "You think I'm just going to let this slide?" Walker smiled. Cold and calculating. "You wouldn't be the first." Jasmine's blood boiled. So many before her had been silenced, threatened, bought off. But not her. Not this time. She reached into her bag, pulling out a folder, the copies of the documents she had collected. This is enough to put you all away for a long time, and I'm betting it's just the tip of the iceberg." O'Donnell and Mills tensed. Walker's expression didn't change, but she saw the flicker of something in his eyes. Fear. For the first time, they were the ones afraid. "You think you're untouchable," Jasmine continued, "but I've already made sure these files are in the right hands. You take me out, the truth still comes out. You silence me, you only prove me right." Walker stood slowly, smoothing his tie. "I admire your courage, Miss Carter. But courage doesn't mean much when you're 6 feet under." Jasmine's heart skipped a beat. Was he threatening her life? Walker sighed, as if disappointed. "It's a shame. You had potential." He nodded toward O'Donnell. "Take care of her." Jasmine's breath caught. "No, not like this." O'Donnell stepped forward, but before he could grab her, the door burst open. "Step away from her." Patricia Holloway stormed in, flanked by federal agents. Malik was right behind them, phone in hand. The room exploded into chaos. "Hands where we can see them," an agent barked. O'Donnell and Mills reached for their guns. Click, click. Multiple barrels pointed their way. "Go ahead," Patricia said coolly. "Give me a reason." Walker's face paled as the agents moved in. "Randall Walker, you are under arrest for conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and multiple counts of fraud," Patricia announced. "You have the right to remain silent." O'Donnell and Mills were yanked away, their faces red with rage. Jasmine stood frozen, her pulse roaring in her ears. She had done it. She had won. Days later, Jasmine stood in front of a crowd of reporters, microphones shoved toward her as cameras flashed. Patricia stood beside her. Malik was grinning from the sidelines. "The corruption in this department ran deep," Jasmine said firmly. "But today, justice was served. No one is above the law." A reporter called out, "Miss Carter, what made you keep fighting?" Jasmine exhaled, her gaze sweeping over the faces watching her. "Because she had no choice. Because if she didn't, no one else would." She straightened her shoulders. "Because the truth matters, and I refuse to let fear decide my future." The crowd erupted into applause. As she stepped away from the podium, Malik clapped a hand on her shoulder. "So, what now?" Jasmine smiled. "No." She glanced back at the cameras, at the people waiting for the next headline. "Now we keep going.